Welcome to Medmarc's Risk Management webinar series. I am Heather Thompson, Director of Internet Marketing for Medmarc. I'm so pleased to kick off today's annual presentation, Ripped from the Headlines, Hot Topics in Life Sciences, with our very own risk management team members, Kate, Klaus, and Zuhal Reed. Kate and Zuhal are both members of our Medmarc Risk Management Services team. They work closely with clients to help identify exposures, review contracts, provide guidance on regulatory standards, and build risk mitigation strategies. This is a great service that we provide with our policyholders, and they have access to our risk management team for all kinds of guidance on best practices. You can go to medmarc.com to review their services in detail. With that, I'm pleased to turn it over to Kate, who will begin today's presentation.
Thanks, Heather. I did want to take a minute just to stop here and let you take a look at our standard disclaimer. And with that, we'll move on to our first topic. Zuhal and I both look forward to this one every year as well. And we have a few topics that we thought would be of interest to everyone. And we're going to start with an update on the Drug Supply Chain Security Act. The Drug Supply Chain Security Act is actually Title II of the Drug Quality and Safety Act, which was passed in 2013 in response to the New England compounding disaster when they had a meningitis outbreak at a compounding facility. So in response to that crisis, there was renewed interest in oversight of compounding facilities. And we got the Drug Supply Chain Quality Security Act, part of the Drug Quality and Safety Act. So Title I of Drug Quality and Safety expanded FDA's authority to regulate compounding facilities. And with the regulation at Section 503B of the FDA Act, FDA introduced new regulations for mass compounders. They're referred to as outsourcing facilities. So these are companies like New England Compounding that were manufacturing a compounded drug that wasn't for a specific patient. It was more a small manufacturing process rather than individualized that you would see in a pharmacy. So the outsourcing facility regulations have been in place for several years now. These facilities have to comply with FDA's good manufacturing practices requirements. They register with FDA, they're inspected by FDA, and those have been in place and going rather smoothly for quite some time. They've been incorporated into FDA's oversight processes. Title II, the Drug Supply Chain Security Act, has been a bit more of a challenge because the goal of this portion or this piece of legislation was to introduce an electronic interoperable system to share information about the chain of custody, the history of drug products, all the way from the manufacturer to the point of being dispensed to the patient. And it's this electronic interoperable component that has made it such a challenge because you're asking disparate pieces of the industry, some who are not regulated by FDA, like pharmacies, like wholesale distributors, to begin incorporating these policies, these practices into their operations as well. The final phase of implementation of the Drug Supply Chain Security Act is beginning now, and the goal is to get to product level serialization. It was initially supposed to take effect on November 27th of this year, but in August, FDA announced a bit of a reprieve. They are still beginning the implementation, the official implementation on November 27th of this year, but there's going to be a 1-year stabilization period in which the companies can begin, implementing, validating these systems that they have created to ensure that the process works. And during that period of time, FDA is going to use its enforcement discretion. It's not going to be inspecting on compliance with this set of regulations until November 27th of 2024, at which point they will begin enforcing it, ideally, as they're saying that is the official date at this point. This is going to apply to pretty much everyone in the distribution chain. It's manufacturers and repackagers, it's wholesale distributors, it's pharmacies that are dispensing these drug products. They all have to have a system that is going to allow for this electronic transfer of information about the product itself. Every new step in the chain is going to need to be able to verify the transactions that took place before they received it from the manufacturer onward. The process that FDA has recommended is to implement an electronic product code information services standard. It is a global standard that is available. There are companies that are out there and helping these entities to begin implementing these systems into their operations. The one concern right now, though, is with this granting of a 1-year reprieve, the stabilization period, that companies may, sort of hit the brakes a little bit, because this is really an onerous challenge for them. It's important for them to remember that this should not be used as a pause. The goal is to use this year to actively implement the systems, validate those systems, and make sure they work. It is really important for companies that are at the beginning of the supply chain, the manufacturers, the repackagers, for them to make sure that their systems get done as soon as possible, because those who are downstream, the wholesale distributors, the pharmacies that are dispensing the products, they can't really implement and validate their systems until they have something to work with. They don't know, if the manufacturers are not providing information to them, they can't tell if their systems are accepting and properly translating and making the information able to be passed on if there's nothing coming in. So it is critical to keep the project moving forward throughout this year, throughout this stabilization period, so that all entities are ready to go when we hit November 27th, 2024. It is quite a challenge. Industry has not been a huge fan of this practice, but shifting from paper to an electronic tracing system should hopefully provide a lot more security for the drug supply in the country. And I will turn it over to you, Zuhal.
Thank you. So there was a lot of buzz in the news this year around the Modernization of Cosmetics Regulation Act, or MoCRA. Very important to note that this regulation had originally created a December 2023 deadline for those in the cosmetics industry, so it would have been coming right up. The FDA also published a compliance policy for cosmetic product facility registration and cosmetic product listing in November 2023, so this month. Now, remember that MoCRA signaled the FDA's intention to regulate activities within the cosmetics industry and the FDA's intention to ensure the production and distribution of safe products, with interest, of course, aligned with public health and safety as always. This new policy addressed the responsibilities of facilities involved in the production of cosmetic products. It emphasized the obligation of these facilities to register with the FDA. This registration is pivotal in maintaining a trail of accountability and ensuring that standards of production are consistently being upheld. Moving further, the new guidance published this month explains the protocols concerning cosmetic product listing. Every product introduced into the sector must undergo listing, which is a process that mandates the disclosure of key product aspects such as ingredients, purpose, and directions for use. This is critical in maintaining transparency with both consumers and stakeholders. Now, MoCRA had introduced swift and effective enforcement policies aiming to ensure all players adhere to these rules, and it outlined how facilities or products found non-compliant may face penalties. This could range from warnings to fines, or in severe cases, closure of the facility or even recall of the product. Significantly, the policy also encouraged the cosmetics industry to engage in a regular update of their facility registration and product listing. Any significant changes, as in changes to addresses, product ingredients, or production methods, would need to be reported promptly. The hope is that this this would aid in uninterrupted monitoring by the FDA. So in essence, this policy will enable the FDA to maintain accurate and current records of all cosmetic facilities and their respective products, similar to FDA's current requirements for pharmaceutical and medical device manufacturers. These new requirements certainly create more work that comes with increased oversight. However, it also provides a mechanism for identifying and promptly correcting any non-compliance issues. The new requirements could certainly help reduce disruptions that arise due to non-compliance. In approaching these requirements, several articles written on this subject outline the importance of consulting early and often with an FDA regulatory expert. Here are some issues that I noted were pinpointed frequently to be mindful of for those who are not familiar with the FDA registration and product listing. Number one was understanding and interpretation. Guidance documents and FDA regulations can be incredibly complex and tricky to understand, particularly for those without a deep knowledge of FDA regulations or legal language. And misinterpretation could inadvertently lead to non-compliance. The second was compliance costs. Manufacturers may face considerable costs in updating their systems, processes, or products to meet these new regulations. These costs might involve training staff or hiring additional personnel or procuring new equipment or software. Part of the key to a smooth transition is anticipating these costs. Another issue I saw discussed frequently was number three, documentation burden. Continuous facility registration and product listing updates can create significant administrative burdens. Manufacturers that have not done this before need to ensure they maintain accurate and up-to-date records for the FDA. And lastly, there's been a lot of consternation regarding number four, exposure to liability. Any failure in updating facility and product information, even if it's unintentional, may expose manufacturers to potential regulatory penalties and even lawsuits. For these reasons, cosmetics manufacturers should consider soliciting the help of regulatory compliance professionals to navigate and effectively respond to these challenges. This becomes even more important because this type of regulation is relatively novel for cosmetics manufacturers, and many of them may be unfamiliar with the regulatory terrain. The other aspect of MoCRA, the MoCRA rollout I wanted to discuss was the publication I noted earlier on, and the announcement this month that came with it that the FDA will not enforce the requirements related to cosmetic product facility registration and cosmetic product listing for an additional 6 months after the December 29, 2023 statutory deadline, which will now be July 1st, 2024. And this was done to provide additional time to comply with these requirements. In addition, FDA does not intend to enforce the registration requirement for owners or operators of facilities that first engaged in manufacturing or processing a cosmetic product after December 29, 2022, or the listing requirement for cosmetic products that were first marketed after December 29, 2022 until July 1st, 2024. So you may notice that this stands in contrast with the original deadline, which was set for December 29, 2023, and does give a nice 6-month extension. As many news articles that I read pointed out this year, MoCRA does entail other legal obligations beyond facility registration and product listing. Although the FDA has extended its enforcement discretion, it's not entirely known how this will impact adverse event reporting and safety substantiation requirements. Remember that under MoCRA, companies will be required to report serious adverse events linked to the use of their cosmetic products, and also they must comply with safety substantiation requirements. Safety substantiation refers to the requirement for cosmetic product importers, manufacturers, and processors to have substantiation for product safety prior to market introduction. I will note, as many have already, that irrespective of the FDA's delay, industry participants should start compliance preparations as early as possible to ensure readiness for the enforcement of all requirements when the extension period expires. And I will turn it back over to you, Kate.
Okay, thanks. Staying in the cosmetic space for a little bit, I want to talk a bit about formaldehyde. There has been some information in the news over the last few months about a proposed ban by FDA on formaldehyde in hair straightening products. So what is formaldehyde? It is an organic compound. It's colorless, but it has a really strong smell to it. It's typically a gas, but when it is held in solution, it's referred to as formalin. It has many industrial applications. It can be used as a precursor to a number of other chemicals. It's also an ingredient in certain resins, in particle board. It's used in product coatings. It can be used in some cosmetic products. It has an antibacterial quality to it, so it can be used as a disinfectant and a preservative. It's used in very low levels in these cosmetic products, but it is possible to use it for those purposes. It is a tissue fixative and an embalming agent. It's used in photography, in developing film. It's a drug testing reagent. There are a number of uses for formaldehyde. And because it has been around for so long and used in so many settings, it is known to be a human carcinogen. So it is a cancer-causing agent. It is an endocrine disruptor. And when it is inhaled or that you're exposed, your skin or mucous membranes are exposed, it can irritate the eyes and the sensitive tissues. It can also cause headaches. It can cause a sore throat, like a burning feeling in the throat, and it can also aggravate asthma. So people who are exposed to formaldehyde in a work setting, whether it's industrial manufacturing, funeral workers, embalmers, people who are typically exposed to it on a regular basis at higher levels than are considered acceptable. These people tend to have higher levels of certain leukemias, as well as nasal and sinus cancers. The difference here is that over the last 25 years, there has been an explosion in popularity in the use of hair straightening products. And these hair relaxers, they're used to smooth the texture of hair. They work by being applied to the hair down to the scalp. So there is a possibility of exposure and absorption of the chemicals through the skin on the head. The formaldehyde is a component of this lotion solution that is applied to the hair. And then it is activated by applying a heat treatment to seal the product into the hair. So after the product is applied all over the hair, a flat iron is typically used to go over every strand of hair multiple times. And when the lotion or the solution is hitting that hot iron, it releases a vapor, and there's formaldehyde gas in that vapor that can be inhaled by the stylists, by the customers. If you're in a salon that doesn't have proper ventilation, it can affect everyone who is present in the salon. There are also long-term exposure concerns. Because these chemicals in the hair relaxers can be absorbed through the skin, there is new research that is finding that frequent and long-term users of hair relaxers are significantly more likely to develop uterine cancer, particularly, versus people who have reported never or rarely using these types of products. This is a very serious concern, particularly for women of color, because they tend to be more frequent users of these types of hair straightening products. And even though they made up a smaller constituency in the research that was done, women of color tended to have higher rates of these uterine cancers than the population overall being studied. So there is a particular risk to that population. There has been some pressure from Congress. There are a couple of congresswomen who have, made statements about this proposed ban of formaldehyde, stating that it's a requirement in order to protect customers who are frequently using these types of products, not without any guidance as to the safety. Particularly for frequent and long-term use, because they haven't had to be studied in the past. And it's not clear at this point if the ban will pass. If it did, it would bring the US more in line with other countries that are more cautious with the use of potentially toxic ingredients. But the proposed ban is targeted for action sometime in the spring next year. So we'll see if any progress is actually made. And with that, I will turn it back over to you, Zuhal.
Thank you. All right, I am going back to Kate's earlier topic, which she discussed a different aspect of. A continuing problem that we saw in the headlines this year is continued drug shortages. So several articles pointed out that the leading cause of drug shortages has been manufacturing quality problems. However, there were also some other contributors that were discussed, like production delays due to late deliveries of raw materials from suppliers and product discontinuations. The FDA has noted that the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research, or CDER, works with manufacturers who are experiencing potential manufacturing and quality problems before they lead to drug shortages. If disruptions occur, or if there's a discontinuation, CDER helps identify and implement strategies to hopefully prevent or mitigate shortages by using regulatory discretion or providing scientific and technical advice. Notably, the FDA released 2 key documents this year that address the drug shortage issues in 2022 and how they will continue to combat this. How they continue to combat this in 2023 and what's to come in 2024. The 10th annual report on drug shortages for calendar year 2022, published in June of this year, and also the other key document was published in April 2023, where FDA published their draft guidance document titled Notifying FDA of a Discontinuance or Interruption in Manufacturing of Finished Products or Active Pharmaceutical Ingredients under Section 506C of the FD&C Act. So the annual report to Congress, it detailed the efforts made by the FDA to address the issue of drug shortages. These shortages can cause significant disruption to healthcare, which is why addressing them remained a top priority for the FDA. Now, in 2022, the COVID-19 pandemic had caused further disruptions to the supply of medical products, but the FDA continued to actively monitor the situation to prevent and mitigate shortages thanks to early notifications from manufacturers about potential supply disruptions. Efforts from the FDA Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research and CDER have successfully prevented 222 drug shortages. These efforts included adopting regulatory flexibility when needed. However, even though the number of new drug shortages has dropped since 2011, thanks to collective efforts, still, though, shortages remain a serious concern to public health, especially when critical drugs are in short supply. Several headlines on this topic noted that numerous manufacturers, both domestically and internationally, grapple with quality issues and capacity constraints. The surge in demand for numerous drugs, driven by this past year, an unusually severe flu and respiratory virus season, has put additional pressure on an already strained pharmaceutical supply chain. However, early data indicates that mandatory notifications of manufacturing interruptions, along with proactive FDA measures, can substantially reduce the threat and the impact of drug shortages. So this year, the FDA published Notifying FDA of a Discontinuance or Interruption in Manufacturing of a Finished Product or Active Pharmaceutical Ingredient. And it outlined the responsibilities of manufacturers in reporting any potential discontinuance or manufacturing interruption. Under Section 506C of the FD&C Act, manufacturers must notify the FDA of any permanent discontinuation or significant manufacturing interruption of a product at least 6 months prior to the event or as soon as possible. Significant interruptions are defined as those which may lead to a meaningful disruption in the supply of that product. The regulations extend to both finished dosage forms for humans, including biological products, and any active pharmaceutical ingredient of such finished dosage form products. These notifications should include detailed information about the product, the cause, the expected duration of the discontinuation or interruption, along with an estimated resupply timeline. Manufacturers are encouraged to maintain open communication with the FDA throughout the process. Any non-compliance with these requirements can result in a public non-compliance letter and fines. The FDA considers this notification system critical, as it allows for timely action to prevent or mitigate potential drug shortages, ensuring the continued availability of crucial medication for patients. The guidance offers clarification and information on the notification procedure to assist manufacturers in the correct practice. It remains an important component in creating a more resilient and robust pharmaceutical supply chain. However, despite the FDA's work to mitigate supply chain issues, the headlines from 2023 make it very clear that drug shortages continue to be present. I wanted to discuss a few drugs that have made headlines this year. The first is cisplatin and carboplatin. They are a medication that is often used in chemotherapy. These drugs face worldwide shortages due to the complex manufacturing process, high demand, and regulatory scrutiny interrupting production. In addition, many chemotherapy drugs, including these ones, are often generic and have thin profit margins for manufacturers. Consequently, when unforeseeable factors such as raw material shortages or manufacturing issues arise, there isn't enough financial incentive for these manufacturers to swiftly resolve production issues. Disruption in the supply chain have become even more prominent due to the ongoing global health crisis, which adds another layer of complexity in the management and distribution of these drugs. Another drug shortage we saw this year was amoxicillin, a commonly used antibiotic. The main source of these shortages often relate to problems in the manufacturing process or supply chain disruptions, such as difficulties in obtaining raw materials. Ozempic, Trulicity, and Adderall have met similar fates. Their shortages, however, show the systemic vulnerabilities in a globalized pharmaceutical supply chain. An issue at any point, manufacturing, raw materials, transportation, labor, regulation, or distribution can lead to a domino effect and eventually result in shortages. Moreover, the global health crisis has considerably strained transport routes, labor force, and raw material supplies, further affecting these medications. Also, off-label use for drugs like Ozempic has created major drug shortages. Overall, while the industry will likely continue to deal with drug shortages into 2024, if we can glean anything from the headlines, they do show that we can definitely help mitigate some of these issues through working very closely with the FDA. And I will turn it back over to you, Kate.
Okay. Staying with the topic of supply chains, I wanted to take a look at two really different but significant issues as they apply to the drug supply chain with regard to eye drops. There has been a lot of news in recent weeks highlighting these two issues. And the first is the prevalence of unapproved drug products on the market. And how FDA is shifting in its tack for dealing with these unapproved drug products. And the second is the really critical importance of your supply chain qualification and risk shifting through contract. So we'll start with the unapproved product issue. Drugs enter the market after they've demonstrated that the active ingredient is safe and that it is effective for a particular use. This is also true of over-the-counter drugs, but instead of the manufacturer having to submit new clinical trial evidence to support the safety and effectiveness of the drug. Instead, for over-the-counter drugs, FDA has taken a list of categories or possible indications or uses for a drug product, and it has identified the active ingredients and the dosage or concentration of the active ingredient that has to be present in the drug, and said that as long as you are using one of these active ingredients for this particular purpose and you comply with our labeling requirements, so you are sticking to the uses that we have authorized, you're providing all of the warnings that we are requiring, the instructions for use that are appropriate. As long as you are meeting all of that criteria that's laid out in FDA's regulations, there's no need to submit an application to FDA for approval to market your drug product. You're free to, market in compliance with the existing regulations. It is not uncommon for companies to try to sell products based upon one of these over-the-counter drug monographs and sort of push the bounds a bit, because there's much less oversight by FDA in that pre-market phase. So they may try to, push the claims about what the product can do, or they may try to maybe use a different active ingredient. They're taking some aspect of the picture that FDA has authorized and tweaking it in a way that makes it an unapproved product. So in this case, FDA was really concerned with products that either hadn't been demonstrated to be safe or hadn't been demonstrated to be effective for their intended use. There were homeopathic products. Homeopathics are in sort of a gray area. They used to be, accepted as an alternative medicine practice, but there's really no evidence to demonstrate the effectiveness for the claims that they were making. And when you're talking about something like an eye drop, where the purity of the product, the safety of the ingredients, because you're talking about products that are diluted many times over, as homeopathic actives are, it's really difficult to get an accurate measurement of the concentration in the product because the amount is just too small. So FDA has focused a lot on these homeopathic eye drop products and homeopathic children's products. There are also a number of companies that are advertising over-the-counter drops for things like pink eye. But pink eye is an infection of some sort in the eye. It's either viral or bacterial. It can be either. And the drugs that are used to treat them are prescription drugs. So to claim in an over-the-counter product that you're able to treat pink eye is beyond what is appropriate for an over-the-counter product to do. FDA's process in the past, when unapproved products are marketed, has always been to go after the manufacturers themselves, to send them a warning letter, which is essentially FDA's version of a cease and desist, saying that your product is unapproved for these reasons. You need to stop selling it until you have appropriate marketing authorization. And then the company has 15 days to send a response to FDA, either saying, this is why we disagree, or here's our marketing application if they choose to go forward. The change here is that in the last year, FDA has started sending these types of warning letters to Amazon itself. Amazon is not a company that is regulated by FDA. It is a storefront that any type of seller can access. And they have started going after, because these sellers of unapproved products they're a bit like a hydra. So FDA is changing that approach to go after the body instead of the various heads of the serpent. Because it is true that as soon as they go after the manufacturer that is selling under one name, it is very easy for them to pop up in a new storefront on Amazon under a different name. So going after Amazon itself and really putting the onus on them to be responsible for the products that they are making available on the market it's a newer approach. It is interesting. I would imagine that Amazon may have some feedback for FDA on that particular approach. So I'm interested to see what happens and if it becomes a policy at Amazon or if there is some pushback. It will likely depend on whether FDA tries to use any more significant enforcement mechanism or penalty. The second issue that I wanted to talk about, this is also something that came about with regard to eye drop products, is supply chain integrity, particularly for companies that are outsourcing manufacturing or using a private label, purchasing a private label manufacturer's product. So there was news just a couple of weeks ago about eye drop products that can cause infection, potentially very serious, significant infection. And the reason that so many products were implicated in this warning is because there appears to be one manufacturer, one private label manufacturer that is making eye drops for a number of very large distributors. So the manufacturing has been concentrated in this small number of manufacturers. It's sort of what we saw with the infant formula shortage, where a number of products were being manufactured in one plant. So when one private label operation fails, and a product is contaminated, there are many, many major retailers, house brands that are impacted. So this particular one included CVS, Rite Aid, Target, Walmart, and a number of other sort of generic brands that are, a lot of the wholesale distributors have a house brand as well. Those were implicated in this also. So it really brings up things that we talk about at Medmarc all the time, but it's the importance of really knowing your source when you are outsourcing any of your work and controlling your risk. So how do you do that? When you are looking at a supplier, it's important to know, what is their regulatory history? Have they had compliance issues in the past? What does their plant look like? Are they operating in clean conditions? Can they turn around a sterile product? Do they have expertise with your product type? If they are a liquid specialist, but not a sterile liquid specialist, that may not be a good fit. What kind of qualifications does their staff have? What is the risk level of your product? How concerned do you have to be with, the close tailoring of the manufacturing of your product? Is it something with very precise specifications? Or is there a range, a safe range for each of your specifications? And then once you've settled on a supplier, it's critical to shift the risk as much as possible. And by shifting the risk, we're talking about contracting. Unfortunately, even though we say it over and over and over, some companies still choose to operate on a purchase order terms and conditions basis rather than actually agreeing to contract terms. When you are using a contract, you are setting forth all of the things that are important for each party. You're making your expectations known, and you're also describing how that will be enforced and what happens in the event that something goes wrong. Ideally, there is an indemnification provision in the contract, and in that indemnification provision, The goal is to see each party taking responsibility for any injuries, any claims that might result from their own actions or negligence. And then hand in hand with that is an insurance requirement, where each party is purchasing their own products liability insurance. And if there is some injury, some claim that is resulting from their actions or negligence, they're going to have that insurance policy. They're going to have the means to meet their indemnification obligation. So these are risks that are always present when there is any sort of outsourcing. And really having that contract in place, having insurance, ensuring that your partner is going to take responsibility and stand behind their work and protect you in the event of any claims resulting from their work. It's really one of the best preventive measures that you can take. And with that, I'll step off my soapbox and turn it back to Zuhal.
Thank you, Kate. All right, so my next topic is one that keeps making headlines across industries: artificial intelligence. In April 2023, the FDA published a guidance document titled Marketing Submission Recommendations for a Predetermined Change Control Plan for Artificial Intelligence and Machine Learning Enabled Device Software Functions. And this was very helpful because AI ML based software as a medical device and the regulatory implications has continued to be a topic of great interest in the life sciences industry. The FDA's 2023 guidance document provides advice to the industry focused on the regulatory framework for modifications to artificial intelligence and machine learning enabled medical software devices. The document outlines the principles for a predetermined change control plan aimed at supporting the safe and effective modification of AI ML algorithms. The document notes that your plan should detail the specifics of anticipated changes, methods used to implement changes, and procedures for managing and controlling such changes. The FDA intends to monitor and oversee changes to previously marketed devices under this plan as well. The document also proposes a total product lifecycle approach to regulate these devices. This approach emphasizes the importance of ongoing updates and improvements throughout the lifecycle of the device, rather than assessing the safety and efficacy at one particular point in time. This is incredibly important because many of the headlines we saw this last year focused on this issue of the FDA regulating a medical device that changes over time with additional data being collected through daily use. Within the document, the FDA describes two categories of changes relevant to AI ML software devices. One is Algorithm Change Protocol, or ACP, and the other is Software as a Medical Device Pre-Specifications, or SPS. The SPS should define the expected updates, which are modifications to software to improve performance or change functionality within the same intended use. On the other hand, ACP is the process to verify and validate the changes defined under the SPS to make sure that these changes do not affect the safety and effectiveness of the AI ML software devices. FDA intends to monitor risks and benefits even after the initial approval, allowing for continual learning and adaptation of the AI ML algorithms. This real-world performance monitoring is a critical aspect of the FDA's oversight approach to AI ML software devices. Several articles noted the potential implementation issues that necessitate manufacturers to reevaluate the impact of these recommendations on existing quality processes like design control, risk management plans, data management practices, labeling, and even adverse event reporting. Moreover, this draft guidance contributes to the expanding compendium of points of view on the ethical and suitable design, development, and deployment of AI ML technology in healthcare. So these perspectives come from industry coalitions, the World Health Organization, the European Union, and the UK. This sort of framework and regulatory approach definitely indicates a looming paradigm shift from supervision processes designed for occasionally updated and retrained AI ML tools to an approach that accommodates machine learning models that learn from data in real time or near real time. A lot of headlines this year also noted that the rise of machine learning in the tech industry has highlighted the need for the FDA to create an adaptable regulatory framework. This draft guidance is the agency's latest effort to develop this framework, but there's a lot of ambiguity that still remains regarding the regulation of this technology. And so it has a lot of different moving parts, and it is still very much in development. And it'll be interesting to see how this plays out in the coming year, because there are purportedly many AI ML based software as a medical device that we'll see coming out in 2024. So it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out in real time. All right, I'm going to send it back to you, Kate.
I wanted to talk a little bit about breakthrough device designation at FDA, and to discuss a relatively new update to the Breakthrough Devices Program guidance document that has some great news for devices that are eligible for the program. So breakthrough devices, the program in general, is intended to speed patient access to new devices. And it does this through coordinating mechanisms for industry to coordinate with FDA. And because they're able to collaborate more effectively, it tends to cut down some of the delay-inducing red tape time. The program is open to devices that are going through the PMA process, the 510K process, or the de novo pathway to market. However, there is a requirement. The device needs to provide a more effective treatment or diagnosis of a life-threatening or irreversibly debilitating disease or condition. And in addition to that, it has to meet one of the following criteria. It needs to be either a breakthrough technology, there has to be no approved or cleared alternative, it needs to present a significant advantage over something that is already approved or cleared, an alternative that is approved or cleared, or the device availability needs to be in the best interest of patients. If these requirements are met, then the manufacturer can request a breakthrough device designation from FDA at any time before they submit a marketing submission, so the 510K, the PMA, or the de novo to FDA. The way that they request a breakthrough device designation is through a Q submission, a Q sub, which is essentially a formal written request to FDA from an industry participant where they are seeking official feedback from FDA. The program is voluntary, but it has been heavily embraced by FDA, heavily promoted over the last few years, as the agency has sought to work more closely with regulated industry with this intent of streamlining the pathway to marketing. Officially, FDA has 60 days from the time of submission of the request for breakthrough device designation to either grant or deny that designation. And if the breakthrough device designation is granted, it gives the manufacturer various ways to interact with FDA. Things like sprint discussions. They can request discussions on a data development plan. They can request a clinical trial protocol agreement. They can, and they also, this is really critical, have prioritized review once they have a regulatory submission for this product prepared and ready to submit. The program has shifted a bit in the last few years. It was replacing the expedited access pathway and priority review for medical devices. And that shift happened in 2015. So from 2015 to 2018, there were relatively low numbers participating in the Breakthrough Device Program just because it was the changeover from the previous programs. But since that switch, they have had 839 breakthrough device designations granted. That was through mid-year of this year. It's resulted in 81 marketing authorizations, 77 of which were for devices. There were also 4 that were device-led combination products. The other mechanism was biologic. The majority of the breakthrough designations have been for products in the cardiovascular, neurology, and orthopedic space. This program has also been really popular among companies that are developing AI devices, given that the close working relationship with FDA is really, it's helpful because they are trying to work through the approval of a new and really paradigm busting technology. And there hasn't to date been, or up until earlier this year, there hasn't been a clear pathway on how to get these AI products on the market that worked with FDA's existing regulations. One challenge that companies in the Breakthrough Device Program have faced has been reimbursement. The Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services repealed its Medicare Coverage of Innovative Technology program in 2021 because they claimed that there was often insufficient evidence of effectiveness for these devices that were receiving reimbursement. But there has been an introduction of a new reimbursement pathway. It's the Transitional Coverage for Emerging Technology program at CMS. And what it does is permit 3 to 5 years of transitional coverage while the manufacturer is creating an evidence development plan to justify official reimbursement. So it's getting them through that stretch of time when there may not be sufficient evidence to make CMS happy, but they've gotten approval from FDA to go to market. So the exciting update that happened in September was an update to the Breakthrough Devices Program guidance document. And what it did was provide some clarification around the types of products that qualify for this breakthrough designation. And the criteria that I listed before, that it be either breakthrough technology, there's no approved or cleared alternative, that it offered a significant advantage, or that availability was in the best interest of the patient. The updated guidance document clarifies 2 specific populations this is going to be important for. FDA stated in the document that the Breakthrough Devices Program may apply to certain medical devices that are intended to promote health equity. So that is something that is going to factor into the whether a device meets this secondary criteria. Additionally, the program may be available for devices that provide non-addictive treatment for pain or addiction, that this non-addictive device mechanism is something that also needs to factor into this assessment of the criteria for determination as to whether it fits in this breakthrough device program. So that's a really helpful clarification for companies that are developing products for people who face a lot of challenges with health equity or have addiction issues and still seek pain management access. So hopefully that will expand the number of companies participating in the program. And I'm going to turn it back over to Zuhal for the last topic.
Thank you. All right, so finally, a topic that caught my eye this past year is the FDA's draft guidance document incorporating updated recommendations from the International Council for Harmonization's Good Clinical Practice Guidelines. Its aim is to modernize clinical trials without sacrificing data integrity or participant protections. Many articles pointed out the immense potential of emerging technologies to streamline procedures, improve data collection, and maintain data integrity across vast data life cycles, and they pinpointed to these factors as the reason for the FDA moving to modernize clinical trials. With a move towards decentralization of clinical trials and the increased use of wearable technology for data collection, this draft guidance has been noted as the FDA's attempt to keep up with the changing terrain of clinical trials. There are updates on several aspects in the draft guidance. First is the utilization of computerized systems in clinical trials, underpinning the importance of technology in modern trials. Second, there are new roles and responsibilities pertaining to data governance for both sponsors and investigators. And finally, the guidelines discuss requirements for obtaining and documenting electronic informed consent, further integrating technology into the trial process. The revised ICH draft guideline, now set as the foundation for the FDA's draft guidance, permits the integration of fast-paced technological and methodological breakthroughs into clinical trials. This change signifies the FDA's drive to digitize and modernize trial design while still trying to ensure that sponsors and investigators are committed to data integrity and participant safety. Central to these modernization efforts is the concept of decentralized clinical trials, or DCTs, and the use of digital health technologies, or DHTs. Now, DCTs involve conducting all trial activities outside traditional trial sites, including participants' homes or local healthcare facilities. This can, of course, present new risks and challenges because investigators may not be in full control where the study participant is not only not in the traditional clinical setting, but the study participant may be in a different city or even in a different state. However, decentralization does enhance convenience for participants, and so arguably or theoretically, it can lead to a wider and more diverse study population. And now DHTs, which is the other main focus of the guidance document, encompasses a broad range of technologies such as wearable sensors that aid in data collection and patient recruitment, making trials significantly more efficient. Their potential extends to patient monitoring, diagnosis, and even health data analytics. Several articles noted that wearables such as fitness trackers, smartwatches, and health monitors could simplify data collection by providing continuous real-time patient data. This could give researchers unprecedented insight into the patient's physiological reactions, lifestyle habits, and overall health status. These devices can reduce the need for in-person visits, thereby increasing the convenience for patients and improving adherence to protocols. More comprehensive and granular data from the digital devices may also help streamline data analysis, potentially leading to more accurate results and even faster clinical trial outcomes. However, always have to be mindful that there are still significant risks and challenges to be addressed. Data privacy is a major concern. Wearable devices collect massive amounts of personal and health data, potentially creating a risk for data breaches. Another issue is technical issues, such as the accuracy and reliability of the devices that may pose Additional challenges for the investigator. Not all devices are created equal, and there may be inconsistencies in data capture due to differences in device specifications or wear and tear. These variations could potentially skew data, which would potentially affect the ultimate trial outcome. Also, the inclusion of digital health technologies brings up the issue of digital literacy and accessibility. Not all potential trial participants may be comfortable with or have access to these technologies, inadvertently creating a selection bias or creating an issue where you may not have any participants above a certain age. Now, moving back to the guideline, it puts a spotlight on the roles of various entities involved in the clinical research, including data scientists, contractors, and third-party organizations. These parties, together with sponsors and contract research organizations, are expected to uphold the FDA's good clinical practice expectations, indicating a shared responsibility for adhering to regulatory standards. And what many have correctly pointed out is the fact that the new draft guidance document may create new exposures and liability for parties who may not have traditionally been exposed to liability. In short, although decentralization of clinical trials and the use of digital health technology allows the clinical trial processes to be quicker and more efficient, the draft guidance document attempts to prevent these things from compromising the quality and dependability of the data collected. It provides a flexible system where researchers can prioritize safety and accuracy depending on the specifics of each trial. The end goal of this approach is to speed up medical discoveries and improvements in patient care by streamlining the whole process of clinical testing. The FDA believes that this strategy is a major step in modernizing and enhancing clinical trials, but as to how it will actually play out, I think we'll have to wait and see. And with that, I will turn it over to Heather.
Yes, thank you. Thank you both for summarizing the 2023 hot topics into just about an hour. You're right a little over, but we got it in. If you want to stay on top of the latest industry topics in 2024, subscribe to our newsletter on medmarc.com site, which will provide you with future webinar invitations and blog posts on current life sciences industry topics. And let's see what 2024 has in store for us.